Okay, thanks for having me here. I come to Adelaide about 4 or 5 times a year, and I really enjoy being here with you. I usually rent a bike. The last time I was here, I rented a bike, and my husband and I rode all the way to the beach and had a really nice lunch in a little Italian restaurant. And to our surprise, we rode past these little horses and things on the way. So I was thinking, how lucky are these people to live somewhere they can ride or run all the way to the beach through all these beautiful parks. So thank you for having me here again. And I also wanted to pay a tribute to these 2 people that just sang this song. But I think they've left, haven't they? They've just left, because it takes a lot of courage to sing a song to their own child just a few months after such a traumatic incident has happened. So I arrived in Australia in '86, and I've really dedicated my whole life here to this cause, which is to prevent, directly and indirectly, prevent youth suicide in Australia. I don't know if you know the statistics, but the greatest cause of death has been consistently in Australia suicide between the ages of 12 and 35, and in particularly affects young males. But it's greater incident than transport accidents, than heart disease, cancer, depression and anxiety, which leads to often to suicide, is a really big health issue, not just mental health issue, health issue. And because it's a stigma, we don't really acknowledge it as much as we should, and I don't think we do as much as we need to do about it. So that's really my life mission. I'm very passionate about it, and we do have very good technologies in Australia to help children from a very young age develop the skills that will prevent them from doing that, and help families and communities acquire those skills so that they can be resilient and prevent anxiety and depression and suicide. Now, my best talks are usually 2 hours. 2 hours is my ideal talk because I've got time to explain things properly. So I'm going to have to be very, very fast, and I apologize in advance. Any of you want to hear it in more detail, you'll have to invite me again for a proper 2-hour talk. And if you want to, and also usually if I've got 2 hours, I can have a sense of humor, which you'll probably appreciate considering the topic is a little bit heavy. But if you want to be trained in any of the specific techniques on how to help children developmentally of different age groups, like preschool age children, primary school, high school, adults, develop skills on how to become strong and not develop anxiety and depression, or even treatment techniques, then you'd have to engage one of my staff. If you come from a disadvantaged community, free of charge, one of the charitable trust staff. We've just received 2 very large grants to do that, so we at the moment in a privileged position to help people. Or if you're not from a disadvantaged community, we've got a pretty good training team, so we can come to Adelaide anytime, and those are usually involve 2 or 3 days, full days training, and then you get really in-depth training on how to implement those techniques, on how to help people either in classrooms or in health settings. But for me, 2 hours is ideal. So we'll just move along very fast. My family, my daughter, I'm kind of old, but I'm lucky because I've got Latin. My background, just in case you're wondering, it's Portuguese background, but my father was in the diplomatic career, so I was actually brought up in Africa in a variety of countries. So traveling is not that appealing. It sounds appealing when you don't have it, but if you've got it all the time, you think being in one place forever, it's wonderful. But I'm old, so my daughter is in her late 20s, and I've got a little granddaughter, Lucy. She's named after my grandmother, who died 2 years ago, aged 99. So it's a great honor, Lucinda. And my son, Tom, and he's done in Brisbane 3 years science, is about to start medicine, so I'm very proud. I've almost convinced him to study the brain. We're almost there, about this close. My husband, Brad, is very, very supportive, otherwise I wouldn't be able to be here. And I do a little bit of volunteer work for animal welfare organizations, so we've got lots of pets. But I cannot have any more, otherwise I'll be alone at home. So we've got, I won't even tell you how many we've got. My ideal would be to have like an animal sanctuary, but I'm not allowed. I've got a great team at Pathways. A lot of people travel from interstate to receive intensive interventions, whether it's obsessive-compulsive disorder. We've got one of, I'm proud to say, acknowledged by the Cochrane Reviews, one of the top 3 programs for treatment of obsessive-compulsive disorder in the world for children and adults. And people travel from interstate to do intensive programs, treatment of OCD, but also treatments for anxiety and depression and resilience treatments. We've also got quite a few. At the moment, I've got 8 new PhD students that have just started. That's one of my passions, is research, because I think research drives really good interventions, and it's very exciting to do research. So I hope I'll continue doing research forever. And all the families I've worked with, I still do clinical work 1 day a week, and I've learned probably more from all the families I've worked with than from anything else. So most of the people I work with now are all adults, because I started working with them when they were very young children, and I still do some maintenance work. But occasionally I take a young child again, because I love playing with children. So I'm very grateful to these families. I've learned a lot from them. It keeps me grounded. It's always been part of my university contracts to have 1 day of clinical work a week. Okay, I've got a Christian background. In Portugal, 99.9% of people are Christian, of course. But I very much admire people like the Dalai Lama, how they can stay so amazingly positive despite everything. And this is very much a saying that drives all the work that we do, that the very motion of our lives is towards happiness. And the thing that all parents want, and all the people that are here in this room, what we want for the youth of our country and the youth, our own children and the people we work with, is that more often than not, people can experience a sense of happiness. Obviously not all the time, that's impossible, but more often than not. That's what we try to do. If our kids are happy, we feel happy. And as you all know, resilience is the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, and that's pretty tough, because all of us, whether it's through death or illness in the immediate family, or the world financial crisis, or the most bizarre things that happen to all of us, including myself, when you least expect, at certain points in life we just have to become strong. And it's really easy to talk about to be strong, but it's very hard to practice to be strong and continue staying a positive person and continue going ahead even though things are knocking you around. That's a skill in itself. And some people seem to have that skill and some people fall apart. So how are we going to make all of us from a young age acquire the skills that are necessary to be able to stay strong no matter what happens? That's what I try to do with my work and my team's work. The other thing that is interesting to observe is that even though obviously most of you work with people that are not always from backgrounds that seem to have advantage, or whether it's financial advantage or social economical advantage or whatever, compared to most countries in the world, specifically Africa and Latin American backgrounds, Australia is pretty much up there in the top 3 or 4 countries in the world in terms of lifestyle. Even the poorest of our poor are very wealthy compared to some people in Latin America and Africa. And when people do sociological analysis of levels of happiness, we find that here we should be so much happier. We should have so much less, logically, levels of anxiety, depression and suicide than some of those countries. Why isn't that happening? Why aren't countries like Australia, the Nordic countries, and other Anglo-Saxon countries such as the UK, the United States, Canada, why aren't we experiencing, with all these financial well-being, why aren't we experiencing more emotional well-being? But the fact is that we're not. When you look at levels of anxiety and depression cross-culturally and geographically, some of our countries, including Australia and New Zealand, we are the ones that rate one of the highest in terms of anxiety and depression. Why is this happening? And people speculate, and there's some preliminary analysis, perhaps lack of extended family support networks, perhaps geographically, because there's such vast quantities of land that people are more separated. There's lots of speculation why. We're not absolutely sure yet why, but what we know is for sure is what are the things that we need to develop to make us stronger and happier. We know that for sure. Why aren't we happier than those countries where people live in one-bedroom apartments with 20 people living there, with no prospects of employment, with hardly any food to eat, but they're still reporting higher levels of happiness than us, living in much better life situation? We're not really sure why yet. There's a lot of explanations that pop up, mainly the lack of extended family support networks. Sorry, I better use consistently one thing, so the arrows take away that thing. Okay, the World Health Organization, I've had the privilege of going there and giving a couple of talks myself in 2007, 2008, and when they do analysis of health difficulties in Western countries, and we belong to the Western country category, not the developing country category, they predict that obesity and early onset diabetes, and that's the lifestyle diabetes, so what they call type 2 diabetes, so not genetic diabetes and not immune-related diabetes, autoimmune-related diabetes, lifestyle diabetes, due to bad diet and basically lack of movement. And obesity and anxiety and depression are going to be the two biggest causes of health expense in Western countries in the next 30 years. And so when they do all these meta-analytic studies, they're pretty good. They employ top experts in the world looking at all health trends. This is not related to mental health predictions. We're talking about health as a whole, embarking mental health and physical health. These are the two big issues that we're going to have to look at and hopefully think about how we're going to prevent these things from becoming explosive in terms of their impact on families and on ourselves as professionals are going to deal with them. These are the two big things, and in fact they overlap a lot. In the last 3 years I've noticed that I'm getting more and more often invited to give talks about anxiety, prevention of depression in diabetes conferences, in allergy conferences, in obesity conferences, and most of the people out there are actually medical professionals, not mental health professionals. So they overlap a lot. So what are we going to do about this? No point in 30 years' time panicking and thinking, what do we do now? We're planning in advance, prevention. Okay, we cannot always build a predictable future, but we can build ourselves for whatever the future may bring, and this is in respect to our children as well. We can always make the future perfect for our children, but we can make our children strong to face the future. And the example of that is the world financial crisis. We could plan everything so our children have got the structures there, but the structures can fall apart. But if they're strong and they've got the necessary skills, they'll be able to cope. Okay, on this slide alone, I usually spend about 3 hours, but I will have to be explained in about 10 minutes max. That's all there is to it. In fact, I might as well put them all so you can look at the gestalt of it all. Back. Okay. Now, the first question that all parents, all professionals in my area always ask is, how can you explain the behavior, or how can you explain how someone is at where they're at, whether it's a child or an adult or an adolescent, or how can you explain where they're at, okay? And as you know, I don't know your background, some of you are teachers. Usually if it's a small audience, I do a count, and I usually then zoom in my talks depending on what your background is. So I usually ask how many people here are researchers. Some people put their arm up. How many people here are teachers, background, psychology or psychiatry background, mental health professionals. So then I kind of target how many are consumers, how many are parents. But today there's so many people, there's no time even to target that. The talk is too short anyway. But in the past, the way we understand human behavior, and still people love that. I don't know, human beings love categories. We love thinking that everything can be put in a little drawer, and once you put it in a little drawer, we just open and close it, and it's all easy to explain and contained. And the example of that is personality theories. In the beginning of the First World War, all the psychologists in the States developed these personality tests to select people from the army. 100 years later, we're still obsessed with personality theories, and most organizational psychs still use them for everything, selecting people for jobs. And you're either extrovert or introvert, and you're going to be like that for the rest of your life. That's all there is to it. And then, of course, star signs have existed forever and a day. Whether they're Chinese star signs or Western star signs, you all belong to one of 12 categories. You're either whatever, I don't know. Mine is pretty boring, so I don't really like it. I'm a Virgo, so it always means the same thing. You'll tidy up, you'll be organized, you'll work hard, your life will be boring for eternity. My daughter is a Scorpio. You'll travel, you'll do really risky, exciting things. You'll eat great food and you'll have a great life. My son is a Sagittarius. You'll travel forever and a day and you'll have a great life. So next time I want a different star sign, please. But, of course, if we could predict human behavior that easily, it wouldn't be fantastic. The fact is, people love that. Of course, diagnostic systems are like that too. And diagnostic systems are fantastic to communicate research in between different professionals, and I use them for research in our own organization, but I'm very cautious about diagnostic systems. They're very good for understanding what people are doing in a scientific term, but beyond that you forget the diagnosis and you try to understand the individual in front of you. That can always change. And if I didn't believe people can change, I'd pack up and I'd start doing art or writing books. And I'd start doing LED light, which I love, and I'd give up being what I do, because if people can't change, there's no point in continuing doing the work we do. I believe people can change no matter how old you are, for the positive. And that's the belief that drives me doing my work. So, scientifically, the point is that people can always change. And the way you can understand people the best, without labeling them and labels becoming self-fulfilling prophecies. I'll give you an example. Nothing is black and white. Everything in human nature is on a normal distribution. Normal distribution means like a mountain, in normal terms, like easy terms to understand, mountain. Most people are in the middle, where it's height, creativity, ability to see the glass as half full more often than half empty. Then there's about 5% on one extreme. You're positive more often than they're not. Most of the time, 5% here on the other extreme. You're negative more often than not. Most of the time, most of us are in the middle, okay? And it's on a continuum. That means you're not stuck. You move along the continuum as life progresses, life circumstances change. Now, diagnosis. When is a diagnosis good? OCD, very good. Why? Because people understand what obsessive-compulsive disorder is, and they realize these people are not just attention-seeking or being pained. They actually can't stop these obsessions that come into their heads. They can't stop doing the rituals. They're not trying to irritate you. They want to stop, but they can't stop. And when people understand the diagnosis and they understand that it's something they can't stop, then they want to help these people, and they can go to effective treatments, and they can change their lives. They don't need to be slaves of this OCD thing. When is it negative? For example, IQs, where, for example, access to diagnosis, personality disorder diagnosis, pain, horrible person, always going to be a difficult person. So what's the point of working with them? They're never going to change anyway. So what's the point of working with them? Like label, difficult person, everybody avoids them. Even before they walk in the door, everybody knows they're going to be a difficult person, so what's the point? Very negative thing. IQ, 20 years ago, that person has got their IQ, so what's the point of trying to change? They're always going to be like that. Might as well just direct them in that direction, because nothing is going to happen from here on. Positives of trying to understand in a scientific way. What is understanding in a scientific way? Behind me. You go to the literature every year, you pay someone that is really good, usually at PhD level, They summarize the literature in your area. That's a summary of my area. What do? They go to review articles that have been published in the last 2 or 3 years in the literature, preferably meta-analytic studies, which is what nerdy PhD students that love stats do. That means they get the data from everywhere in the world and they look at risk factors, protective factors. Every single one of you sits in the middle there, okay? The way you are at the moment, which changes every year throughout on a continuum, is what you are is an interaction between the risk factors in your life and the protective factors in your life, okay? And whether those are strong or weak, or an interaction between those two things explains the way your developmental pathway is progressing. And they change. There's things coming into the literature all the time because science is not rigid. There's new things, advancing science coming into our grasp and our awareness all the time. So, for example, if you asked me to give this talk last year, we didn't know anything about attention biases. This comes from the Netherlands. Within the last 9 months, they have very good data on attention biases that is now incorporated into our risk factors models. Neurological brain development, last 2 or 3 years, fantastic findings that have come into these models. Okay, so I'll start with the risk factors. Very interesting research. The top one, we've known it for about 15 years at least. Really 20 years, but 15 years has been really good research. We've had very good longitudinal research, especially coming from New Zealand, Christchurch, but we've got it in the States, we've got it in Australia, UK, Nordic countries, etc. 1 in every 5 babies is born much more sensitive than the other 4, and this is independent of gender, socioeconomic background, race, independent of any other factor. 1 in 5 of us, so in this audience there'd be at least, I don't know how many people here, quite a lot of us, would have been born very sensitive. How do they know that? So some people in these labs, when babies are born, they do the APGAR scores, which all parents here know what the APGAR scores are, and then the babies that participate in the research also do these other tests. Like, don't worry, they don't traumatize them because the ethics now are just so strict that the babies will not get traumatized, but they put strong lights in front of the baby's eyes or strong sound or piece of ice on the skin. They measure everything, like cortisol level in saliva, sweat index, heart rate, pupil dilation, and a variety of other things. 1 in 5 babies, for example, heart rate, whenever there's an aversive stimuli, so something strong, like a strong, loud sound, their heart rate goes up almost vertically, and then it stays up for a long time, even after the aversive stimuli goes away, okay? The other 4 in 5 babies, it also goes up, but goes up slower. And then when the loud sound goes away, or the piece of ice on the skin goes away, it comes down pretty quickly again. So the person gets distressed, everybody gets distressed, but they calm down pretty quickly. But 1 in 5, they get distressed very quickly. They stay distressed for a long period of time. Okay? Sensitive. They used to call them behavioral inhibited children, but now they don't call. That's a silly terminology. They call it physiologically sensitive children. Now, their physiological sensitivity does not change. If you were born like that, well, until there's genetic manipulation in the future, which it's a big ethical thing. But if you're born like that, if you test you at 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, you're still physiologically sensitive. You're going to feel things very intensely, very quickly, and you're going to stay distressed or aroused for a long period of time. Okay, how do you know that? As a parent or an educator, you know it's the baby, that there's a loud noise or something unpleasant happens in the house, and the baby screams like mad, and then you put it in the car, you drive around the countryside a few times, the baby's still screaming, and 2 hours later still screaming. Finally, when you're about there, they finally fall asleep for a couple of hours. But your other baby, that is now a child, you drill in the bedroom wall, they don't even wake up, and anything is easy. And then the child is 10 years old, he's about to go on his first school camp. 3 months before, they're worrying about it, 3 months in advance. What's going to happen in the school camp? What's going to be in my cabin? Where am I going to eat? What if I don't like the food? What if I can't do the activities? What if they're going to be mean to me? They go to school, there's a replacement teacher. Everybody loves replacement teachers. Why? Because they don't know what was being done the day before, so usually a pretty good run that day. Well, this sensitive child does not like replacement teachers. Why? Because it's different. They look different, they don't know what's going to happen, it's all very stressful, everything is stressful. So they worry about it, they get stomach aches, they get headaches, everything is stressful. So, okay, now this is like the behavioral characteristics. So if you pick up 5 of these very sensitive kids at birth, you follow them up to about mid-primary school, and then you bring them all back to the lab, because these ideas that you test them every year, they usually have, these research teams, a little bit of money, so they can afford bringing people in, and they test them. So they test them in the lab, they're all sensitive still, all the way along until 30, 40. They've got long-term follow-up there in New Zealand and some countries. They're all sensitive physiologically, but in behavior, people change, okay? So at about pick at age, mid-primary school, age 8, okay? If you pick 5 of these kids, very sensitive kids, what happens to them at about age 8? Statistically, about half of them are showing signs of anxiety. What's signs of anxiety? Signs of anxiety, excessive worry, so worrying about every little thing, whether it's big or small, little things. So everybody worries. It's not black and white. Nothing is black and white. Everybody worries, depending on life circumstances. But these children or adults with anxiety worry a lot about lots of things. So these children worry about every little thing. Okay, difficulty going to sleep. So you go to bed at night, most people go to sleep after a little while. These children don't go to sleep, or adults don't go to sleep. You're worrying about what happened today, what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow, every single detail, okay? Difficulty going to sleep. Psychosomatic symptoms, what are they? Stomach aches, headaches, skin disorders. So you take the kid to the doctor every single week. What's wrong with my child? The doctor does all these tests. There's nothing wrong. It's stress. They're just worrying all the time. Psychosomatic symptoms, headaches, some stomach aches, skin disorders, vomiting a lot, difficulty going to sleep, excessive worry, perfectionism. I want to do things unless I only do things that I know I'm perfect at. If I'm not perfect at them, I don't even want to try because, lots of things in life you do them because you're good at them. But there's lots of things you do them just for fun or just to try. That's just life, isn't it? Some of us are good at certain things. I'm hopeless at drawing. I'm hopeless at lots of things. But I just do them to try or just to have fun. You don't have to be good at everything. Anxious kids like being good at everything and absolutely sure things are going to go perfect. If they're not sure, they don't want to try. So they're going to get sick on sports day. They're going to get sick if there's something new being tried in the classroom. That's the perfectionism tendency that you only want to do things if you can predict what's going to happen and if you know you're going to be perfect at it. Perfectionism, difficulty dealing with change. These are just some of the what we call symptoms or signs of anxiety. And we all have a little bit of it, especially when we get stressed. But when I'm talking about anxiety, it's like much more often than not, all the time, most of the time, okay? Now, if you pick, but statistically, half of the kids are experiencing signs of anxiety, half of the kids are not. Okay, physiologically, in the lab, they all still very sensitive. If you expose them to the strong light and all these strong stimuli, they all physiologically very sensitive. Behaviorally, if you go and observe them at home, at school, etc., about half of them are showing signs of anxiety, half of them behave like any other child, no signs of anxiety. What's the difference in those half? They've got much stronger protective factors in their lives. Okay? Now, jump another 7 or 8 years and pick them up late adolescents, about grade 11 or 12, okay? So you're picking up 15, 16-year-olds. What happens to this? Now, imagine you're picking up 5 of these kids. You're self-selecting the ones with a tendency for anxiety, okay? So now we're going to pick up 5 of these kids that were showing heavy signs of anxiety in primary school, okay? Because what I want you to see, it's the developmental pathway. We're picking up this half of these kids that were showing signs of anxiety. We're following them up all the way to adolescence. If I had 2 hours, I'd explain developmentally what happens to the different type of kids. We're talking about the ones that are showing signs of anxiety in primary school. We're going to study them later on, 7 years later. It's not half and half anymore. It's not 50% statistically anymore. It's about 8 out of 10. 80% of these kids are showing signs of strong anxiety now, and I'm sorry about this because I know a lot of you are teachers and are non-mental health professionals. Now we're not talking about signs of anxiety, we're talking about diagnosis of anxiety. And when I talk about diagnosis, I'm talking about more severe anxiety. I don't like labeling because my philosophy is, and I'm in the education department now, I worked in psychiatry and psychology for almost 20 years of my life. My philosophy is, this is the human being, this is the disorder. And our role is to help this person, first the person, fight that diagnosis. You are going to fight it. And it's outside of you, and you're going to fight it until you're in control of it. You are the boss. With little children, you become the boss of OCD. The OCD is not the boss of you. Okay? That's my philosophy. Now, these adolescents are showing signs of social phobia, panic disorder, and other forms of severe anxiety. But the worrying thing for me, as a professional in this area, is that anxiety, we've got very, very good treatments for anxiety if they go to the right people. It's one of the easiest things to treat. That's why it's so sad that people don't come for treatment more often. Okay? It's easy to treat. The worrying thing is that most of these people also have got a diagnosis of depression as another diagnosis. Is that 8 out of 10 either have got a principal diagnosis of depression with a secondary diagnosis of anxiety, or vice versa. A first diagnosis of anxiety, secondary diagnosis of depression, depending which one has got the strongest impact. And usually depression, because of the severity of the diagnosis itself, has got a stronger impact on life than anxiety. Because anxiety and depression go like this in late adolescence. So about 8 out of 10 kids that were found anxious in primary school have got a diagnosis of anxiety and depression, comorbidity, in late adolescence. So why is this so good to know? Why is research, these boring things some people, nerdy people do, good, interesting? Because we can see the developmental pathway. We can see that sensitivity at birth is a risk factor for anxiety in primary school, which is a risk factor for depression in late adolescence. Why is this good to know? Because you don't wait until then. You don't wait until then. You intervene here. You intervene before primary school or in primary school, because you know if you do it there, you can prevent that from happening. There's research published all over the world showing you can effectively prevent it from happening. That's evidence-based research. Based on research trials replicated around the world, you can prevent it from happening. Okay, obviously there's treatments, but treatments are more expensive and harder work. Okay? So this is interesting to know. Still, there's 2 out of 10 that didn't develop anything. Why? Again, that's always good to know there's an exception to the rule, because of the protective factors. Always go back to the protective factors. There's protective factors. It's like putting an immunity around the person, emotionally and socially, so that no matter what happens, they still stay strong. There's protective factors that can help these people that have got a vulnerability for staying strong. 2 out of 10. The odds decrease as you get older, but they're still there. There's still 2 out of 10 that didn't develop these problems, okay? So look at those 2 out of 10. There's still 2 out of 10. There's things you can do to make these people not develop these. Now, you're probably all panicking because every family, 1 in 5, that means every family has got these. This thing about mental illness being something you hide because it only happens to someone else, and it's something embarrassing. It happens to everybody. All of you experience anxiety and depression throughout your life, whether it's in adolescence when your hormones change, whether it's when something really difficult happens in your life, whether someone really close to you develops chronic illness or severe illness or dies, or something really tough happens at work, or just life events. All of you will experience anxiety and depression unless you're an absolute statue. of strength. And there are statues of strength in life, but most people experience feeling worried, feeling sad at a very severe levels at least once. Menopause, retirement, lots of life events that are pretty tough for people, That's a normal life experience. But imagine you are the strongest people ever, this audience here. It will happen in your family, in your closest family members, for sure. For sure, whether it's your son, your wife, your husband, it will happen. It's normal. So instead of distancing ourselves from it and thinking it won't happen, we have to embrace it and think it's part of being a human being, having a heart and having emotions, is that it's part of normal life experience. So we're going to embrace it, and we're going to make people around us so strong that when it happens, we can all bounce back from it before it becomes such a big, heavy weight in our family. That's the idea. That's what I want to help people develop. So, is being born sensitive? That's what everybody probably is now panicking, like a curse or something really destructive. No, a lot of very sensitive people are very talented. It doesn't mean you're sensitive, you'll be for sure the best artist ever born. But I can tell you right now, all the children I've worked and my colleagues have worked that I'm very associated with, I've now got about 18 graduates, PhD graduates, they've all researched the same area as me. All these children and families are very talented kids, all of them, whether they're artists or musicians or at a cognitive level, because it's not just cognition, it's other areas of talent. There are the sports people or artists or writers, or in some areas, very little area, they excel. So they're so sensitive, they learn things very fast, and they're very good at something as long as they're strong enough to be able to get through life. I would say retrospectively, if you go through history and we could measure all these people that were great artists, great writers, great musicians, great athletes, most of them would be 1 in 5. But some of them succeeded and some of them fell apart when bad things happened. So what we need to do is help these people be able to be strong. Okay? Next risk factor. Neurological brain development. Only 2 things. On this one, it's so exciting. That's why I'm trying to convince my son to go and study the thing. But there's so much to learn because we know nothing. It's just an area. We know a tiny little bit. There's so much to learn. Only 2 things that I have time to talk to you about. The first one is when I went through uni, and basically my background is science, we were told that your brain developed, and by the time you were 25 was at a peak, and then from there on it kind of went into a slight decay, and decay. By the time you're about 50 or 60, downhill from there, and there's hardly anything ticking up there, and you might as well just sit down and wait to die because your brain is just like nothing is happening. Now, that was not that long ago. I'm kind of old, but not that old. Like 30 years ago at universities, brain develops, and then downhill, like peak, downhill. Okay? Well, that's not the case. And I'll give you just one example that really impressed me. That's not the case. Your brain will continue to develop until you're 120, if you live that long, depending on what you choose to do with your life. It won't develop as fast as when you were 5, unfortunately, and you have to put in a bit more effort, but it will develop. You'll form new cells in your brain up to your 99 if you wanted to, depending on what you choose to do. So that's the good news. Your brain is plastic. That means plastic is the good word here, not plastic like the environmental disaster. It changes. And basically the trick is you just have the 2 things that people don't like doing because we all love our habits. One, you have to move every day. And move is not like moving from your car to your seat and then moving from your seat to your car. You have to exercise daily for an hour. I'm sorry, but you just have to. And that means you have to walk, you have to bike ride or swim or something. You don't have to be a triathlete, don't worry. But if you can be a triathlete, that's even better. But you have to move every day for an hour. And not just around the house, turning on the TV and turning it off. You have to move. Why? Because you increase blood flow, and that's extremely important. You have to move every day for an hour, not just 1 hour on the weekend, and then you're recovering for the rest of the week. every day for an hour. Now it's serious. And then you have to learn something new all the time, a little bit. It doesn't matter what it is. A new thing to cook, or a new way to garden, or a new language. Obviously the best things to learn, because it involves more brain matter, is a new language or musical instrument, something complex. But it doesn't matter. If you learn something new, so for example, you used to walk this way, you walk the other way, and you just challenge your habits and you learn new things all the time. You make your brain learn new things all the time. Your brain will form new synapses until the day you die at 120, if you're healthy. It will form new brain cells all the time, all the time, all the time. So it depends on you, how you want your brain to improve or not improve, okay? So it's great. So they've done this research. This is just like 2-year-old research, where they put all these people between 90 and 100. That's pretty elderly. And they put them on treadmills. So don't worry, the treadmill wasn't going at 20 k's an hour. But they had to move on this treadmill for, I can't remember exact the time, I don't like saying exact, but it was between half an hour and an hour, and they had to be on that treadmill, and they had to walk on the treadmill. And so it was daily, and it went for about 3 weeks, and they measured all these different things, and including these brain imaging scans of all these cells, and blood pumping up the cells, and all these things. And then they made them learn new things, like these new, people chose either Italian or something or other. They had to learn a new language, just not the language completely, but new words of their language. And then they had to cook something else. They had to learn a new thing for about 2 hours every day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And then they measured all the new synapses in their brain through imaging studies, and also the blood flow in their brain and all this. And after about 3 weeks, their brain had all these new synapses in all these different areas on their brain, depending on what they were learning for that week. 1 week they learned a new language, the other week they learned different notes on a musical instrument, the other week they learned something to do with scent, to do with cooking and stuff. There's all these new areas in the brain that had all these new synapses, and they were between 90 and 100. Isn't that exciting? You can do that too. Isn't that exciting? But that's really good for me, for us, because that means all the kids we'll work with, all the families we'll work with, for emotional learning, social learning. People can learn. People can form new cells. People can change. It is repetition, 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 because all this is changing habits, because, of course, the brain keeps doing things the same way, because it's easier. But the more we practice, the more we force it to do it, new cells are being formed. That's very exciting for our area, emotional and social learning, to people changing their emotional lives. It's very exciting. Okay, stop there. The scary thing about this new area, which I don't have time to talk about because that would be a 2-hour talk in itself, is what we found out about adolescents. What did we find about adolescents? One, that adolescent people, the frontal lobe, which is the part of the brain responsible for forward planning, planning ahead, self-regulation of emotions, abstract thinking, empathy, feeling what other people are thinking, a lot of human functions are here on the frontal lobe. It's not fully developed until the age of 25 in males in average, not black and white, most males. 25, between the ages of about 12, in boys about 13, 14 and 25, girls, because they develop a bit earlier, about 11, 12 and 21. The brain is not fully developed. In fact, it's like what they call under construction. That means they've actually got less synapses than a child a little bit younger, because what happens is this pruning. So in a way it's a bit sad. They kind of lost the ability. You know when they say that if you come to a country after 12, it's very hard to lose your accent. But if you come before 12, well, this is not rigid, within a certain range. It's easy to learn another language and you won't have accent in either one. And there's this pruning of synapses, and during adolescence, the weight of the human brain is actually less in adolescence than in childhood, because all these cells disappeared and they're getting thicker and stronger
with the learning that will make the full developed brain of an adult finally at age 25. That's got a lot of implications for parenting, for education in the next 20 or 30 years. Basically, that needs a lot of people that age need a lot of monitoring, a lot of role models, strong role models, a lot of structure around them so they don't kill themselves. Because can you imagine five 18-year-olds with no frontal lobe in a vehicle that goes 1,200 k's an hour? Or saying that people can self-regulate at age 16 in front of a computer game that is designed for addiction by multi-corporations in the United States. How can they self-regulate? Not even adults can self-regulate in front of these computer games. How can we expect our adolescents to self-regulate in front of computer games? But that's another talk about internet addiction. There's no frontal lobe there. The probability of disaster is like 100%, you know? Anyway, that's a risk. You now understand why it's in the risk factor category, don't you? Risk factor category. Okay, big risk factor. Now, the next one, very interesting. The reason I spent 2 hours on this PowerPoint, because there's so much to say. It's so interesting, so exciting in research. Attention biases. Okay, we've known for like 50 years. In my area, children, we've discovered that how to teach children to change thinking. How can I teach a 4-year-old to think in positive ways? Piaget, decades ago, showed that children can think about what they think until they're about 8, 9, or 10. Anyone who knows developmental psych. Okay? That's why back when he talked about cognitive restructuring, how do we teach? We can, just 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people used to think you can only teach positive thinking to adults, because adults are the only people that can actually think about what they think, because they're developmentally ready to analyze their thinking and change their thinking. Okay? And then, when I started my PhD 20 years ago, I started developing these techniques to teach primary school age children and adolescents ways of changing their thinking. How can you change unhelpful thoughts to helpful thoughts? That was pretty easy. But it took me a long time to develop techniques to teach preschool age children through play to change what I call red thinking into green thinking. And we can do that. We've already got published studies showing that you can effectively teach 4- and 5-year-olds how to change red thinking into green thinking, which is very powerful in terms of staying healthy, a positive person long term. It's one of the essential ingredients to be resilient, is to be a positive thinker. Okay? Obviously, children don't understand the word positive, but they understand helpful, having a helpful thought. This is primary school age. Little kids understand green and red because they know the red traffic light, you stop, the green traffic light, you go. But I don't have time to go into details. But we've known that positive thinking is associated with emotional well-being, with not falling into depression. We know that from Aaron Beck in the cognitive triad, becoming a positive thinker. We know all that, right? Now, we didn't know much. We knew that people who are anxious tend to pay attention to negative things. We've known that for a long time. That was one of my PhD studies and many other PhD students 20 years ago. What we didn't know, what were predictors of relapse in anxiety and depression treatments. This is a Dutch team. I don't even know if it's published yet. It was in press about 3 months ago. I went to a conference last year in Holland, and they had all this research coming out where they did 10-year follow-up data. So they followed big cohorts of people, and they had data coming from overseas as well. And they followed children that had their children and their parents who also had anxiety and depression, receiving treatments, evidence-based treatments, proved effective to work. And they wanted to know what are the predictors of relapse 10 years later. So we know that some of our treatments are that good that only about 2 out of 10 people are going to relapse, especially if they receive these interventions when they're children. Okay? Only 2 out of 10 are going to fall back. And we know they're still thinking in positive ways. When we test them 10 years later, they still can say, if I say I can't do it, if I say I'm not going to try that, if I say I'm hopeless, that's really a negative thing to make me feel how I feel about myself. So I'm not going to say it. I'm going to change my thinking. They can still change their thinking. They're still positive thinkers. So that's not a predictor of relapse because they're still thinking in positive ways. They looked at lots of other things. genetic loading in parents with anxiety and depression in children. They looked at SES. They look at lots of things. The strongest predictor of relapse at 10 years was the way people paid attention on a minute-by-minute basis. And they did that with lots of different experiments, both computer experiments, where they fix people's sight on this computer where things come at subliminal level, plus a lot of other experiments, real-life experiments. So what is this attention bias? The easiest way I can explain to you in 2 minutes, because I'm going to run out of time for my talk, is you wake up in the morning, you open your eyes, and you can choose to look, not just look, listen to, look, pay attention to what you feel on your skin, pay attention to what you smell. Lots of different things inundate your senses every minute of your life. You wake up in the morning, for example, my bedroom, there's a window there, like all the way along, and lots of things I can look at. They're usually trees, and there's lots of light on the trees, and I can look at the different colors of green, or the rain falling on the green. This year there's been a lot of rain in Queensland. I don't know in Adelaide, but last year there was drought. We couldn't even have more than 1 minute showers. This year has been Indonesia. So I always think, wow, rain on the trees again. Isn't that beautiful? Then I listen to the rain falling on the trees. Usually birds coming in, so I listen to the birds. And then I'm very lucky because I do have someone very supportive in my life and usually smiles. And I've got lots of pets come waving their tails. And then it's just like they're always happy to see you. Animals are wonderful. My opinion, really much better than human beings in general. Sorry about the insult. Now, children are pretty good too. But they're always happy. So lots of things happening that are good. And you can pay attention like the way the trees smell in Australia, these beautiful smells of this. I just think there's so many beautiful things. And you can pay attention to all those things, the people smiling around you, and then the smell, if you bake bread, the smell of baking bread. And usually you've got this beautiful, because we're lucky, we live in a pretty good country, so you've got this beautiful bed linen around your skin, or you go and have a warm shower. Everything is pretty good. Or you can go to the mirror and go, oh, I've got more wrinkles, I look exhausted, I'm always overworked, and oh no, look at my timetable, I'm going to die if I continue doing this. And of course I don't have any of my favorite cheese in the fridge, and just look at that butter. My pig of my son, who eats everything there is in the fridge within 5 minutes of it being purchased, has put his knife with all his whatever, Vegemite or whatever in my butter. And like there's so many things you can choose. There's basically what they say is that every minute in life you get out there, you can choose to look at, listen to, pay attention to so many different things, and it's up to you what you train yourself to pay attention to every single second of your life. And it's almost unconscious, it becomes unconscious. And that's why we have to train ourselves and our kids to, if you're doing a really good parenting job, and there's no good or bad parents, like Winnicott, the pediatrician after Freud said, it's not about good and bad parents. We'll try our best. It's about being a good enough parent for the child in front of us. And some children are really high maintenance, and some children are really easy. So being a good enough parent, a good enough health professional, it's training people to pay attention to all those tiny little things that are happening around us that are the source of happiness. And actually young children have got a gift that if you pick up a 2 or 1 year old, they will find things around you that you haven't even noticed that are happy things. The little flower on the footpath you haven't noticed. The person that is smiling at you and you didn't notice. The beautiful, the children find those things. Most children have got a tendency to find those things. Some people have a tendency to find those things. Attention training is extremely important. As soon as I found this data, I went back to all my new edition that is coming out. It actually came out today in Brisbane. I've been writing for a year, and I revised about 1/3 of my books and filled them in with attention training exercises, because if it's that important in terms of relapse prevention, if it's such a strong predictor of long-term wellness, how we train people not just to think in positive ways, but how to pay attention to things. Little things. It's the tiny little things we pay attention to every second of our lives. We have to train people around us to do that. Okay? I don't have time. I could explain it so much better, and now you do it for different age groups, but we don't have time. Life events, another risk factor. The most important thing you have to learn here is not single incident life events that have got the hugest impact in your life. Obviously, if you go in a highway, you have a horrible traffic accident, 2 people in your car and your family die, that's a traumatic event, no denying. But it's easier to overcome emotionally than if something happens every single day for a long period of time, such as living with chronic severe illness, living with life-threatening illness like siblings of children with cancer. It's very painful. You wake up every day and the pain is there for days and days and days and days and days on end. Living with chronic emotional or sexual abuse or physical abuse happens every single day. Severe bullying, not just, you can't play with me, I'm being bullied. It's just black and white. Like really severe stuff happening on a daily basis. That's very traumatic. It's trauma, the most difficult trauma to overcome. It's something that happens for a long time, a little bit every day. Okay? And that's the people you really have to get support for and help for. So living in a war situation where the war goes for a long period of time. Okay? So these are the main risk factors according to the literature. Why are they there on the left-hand side? Because when we do statistical analysis, they load in meta-analytic studies on the risk factor side. We know they've got an impact. We don't know enough on how to turn them into protective factors yet. Now, protective factors we know a lot about. We know we've got very effective technology on how to make people strong. We know how to teach parents, mental health professionals, teachers, on specific techniques on how to teach anyone. It's not rocket science, how to make people so strong that no matter what happens in life, most people can become resilient, okay? So what are they? First one, and most important, is attachment. What is attachment? In the old days, just about 10 years ago, people thought, 20 years ago, it's just a mother-child relationship. It's not. Attachment, basically, in very simple terms, is that every single human being needs to receive unconditional love from at least one other person, or actually animal, throughout life. So it doesn't matter if you're 99 and you're in a nursing home, you still need unconditional love. And you've got dementia, but you don't have dementia, emotional dementia. You may have cognitive dementia, but you still have emotions. You still need unconditional love from at least one other person in your life. That's very important. And if you don't have it, get a cat, get a dog, or a chicken that you can cuddle or something. But it's true. There's a lot of studies showing it's true. People need unconditional love. Unconditional love doesn't mean putting up with crap. If the behavior is terrible, you have to say, I'm not going to put up with this behavior, but you still unconditionally love your child or the person, unconditionally like the person you're working with. You respect them for being a worthwhile human being. Everybody is a worthwhile human being, okay? Where do attachment studies come from? Just to give you the significance of the construct. Many years ago, decades ago, these guys started studying monkeys, put them in little cages, unfortunately, and one cage there's the iron monkey mum with milk, the other cage actually they were all in the same cage, there's a monkey mum with fur, and he's filming them. How much time do these monkeys spend with the monkey mum with fur and the monkey mum with iron, with the milk? And surprise, surprise, the monkeys were pretty hungry, but they still chose to spend more time hugging the monkey mum with fur than the monkey mum with milk. So that's really interesting, that the drive for affection and tenderness, it's stronger than the drive for food. And then he did lots of studies with orphans and stuff, this guy called Bowlby, right? But attachment is a very, very important drive. And don't panic. Ideally, we have it from our parents, from our mom, and then our dad. But some people don't get it from their parents, so they have it from a grandparents or uncle and aunt, an older brother or sister, or grade daycare mother, grade 1 teacher, an allied mental health professional. You never underestimate the positive impact you can have in the life of a person. by unconditionally respecting, loving, or liking them. It can be the thing that turns someone around. Ideally, it would come in the first few years of life because that's a very marking relationship in terms of developing that unconditional attachment and the empathy to understand what other people feel, and the empathy to develop, the ability to develop empathy, feel what other people are feeling, and that can only be developed in the intimacy of an attachment relationship. Okay, much more important than learning to read and write. Okay, now, but some people don't have any of that, but they've got a pet that they really love, and the pet loves them, or an animal. Doesn't matter if it's a dog, a cat, or a cow, or a lamb, or whatever. They love that animal, and the animal loves them. And there's case studies where that relationship was very, very important in the child's life or the human being's life. And some people didn't have any of that, but they really believed there was a spirituality up there, either God or whatever the religion was, that person really, really loved them. And that helped them get through life and have an okay existence. Okay, now the second most important protective factor is the ability to see the glass full more often than half empty. The ability to be a positive thinker. Now, most of us see the glass half full or half empty, depending on life circumstances. Remember, we're all on a continuum, normal distribution. So usually Mondays are pretty good. By about Friday, patience is running out. We tend to see the glasses half empty if someone gets on our nerves. If our family life is going well, we're healthy, things are going well, we tend to be glass full type of people. If things are not going so well, we tend to be a bit glass half empty. Usually when we're younger, because we haven't gone through too many negative life situations, we tend to be more glass half full. The point is, and there's people, no matter what happens, the 5% on this side, that no matter what happened, they still are 9 out of 10 times glass half full type people. And those are all the people you really admire. And they don't have to be great heroes. There are the great heroes. They're all the historical figures, including religious figures. Jesus Christ, Gandhi, all the people you really admire. All the people you really admire that went through really, really difficult life circumstances. That woman from their country that was in a house, jailed for 20 or 30 years, and says, oh, I want to be friends with the people who jailed me. You know, that's pretty tough. Or Nelson Mandela, you know, or all those people. That's pretty amazing way of being. No matter what happens, they still the glass half full. All the people you admire. All of you know, hopefully, at least one person that is in this 5%, that no matter what happens in life, they still have a smile. They still see the best in everybody. Being a half glass full, half full glass type person is seeing the best in yourself, in other people, and the world. Okay? That's pretty tough. If you know these people, someone in your family, in your community, try to make friends with them because they're wonderful to hang around with. They make you feel good about yourself. They usually brings you good health, brings you good mental health, good physical health, makes you feel like the world is a wonderful place. Hang around them. And then there's the other people on the other side. No matter what happens, the glass is always half empty. You know, life is great, they've got a great family, great job, talented, live in a great country, but the glass is always half empty. Pretty exhausting to hang around them, okay? Most of us are in the middle. The good news is, wherever you are here, you can always become a more positive thinker if you choose to. But it's hard work. It's hard work to change the way you think. It's like hard work to start exercising every day, isn't it? Why? Because you're always tired. You're always tired because you don't exercise every day. So then, of course, changing that, it's really hard work. It's really hard work. So the same thing with thinking. If you're used to thinking a certain way, it's a habit. So how are you going to challenge that habit? And the older you get, I notice in myself, the more, by definition, the longer you live, the more difficult things you're going to have to face in your life, either yourself or in your immediate family. So staying a happy, positive person, the older you get, it's hard work. But you don't want to become a sourpuss. And then you can look yourself in the mirror, and as life goes by, you start looking like a sourpuss. You know how people look, the way they live? Like some people are old, but they look really happy. And then some people are old and they look like sourpusses. I don't want to look like a sourpuss. I'm going to try so hard not to. I'm going to do my utmost best not to. But it's hard work because sometimes there's so many things that are really tough happen all at once, all in 1 year. And then you go, oh, how am I going to stay a positive thinker? And then you just have to, because there's still very good things out there to think about. Okay, now that is the strongest positive, after unconditional love, is the best thing you can give your kids. The ones you work with, the ones in your family, your partners, your people you work with, is the next most powerful protective factor. It's associated with good health, with success, whatever way you want to measure success, positive interpersonal relationships, happiness. Everything that is good in life is associated with a positive thinking style. Everything good. So you better invest a lot of time in making it happen, because it's awesome. So just let's put a lot of energy in making it happen. Let's put a lot of energy. Okay, third one, in order of importance, is having an extended family support network. Now, I understand in Australia it's much tougher, because in Portugal it's pretty small. The chances you bump into your family is pretty high. They're all around, and if they're not, they make so much noise you have to listen to them, But in Australia, it's the whole of Europe fits in Australia. It's pretty massive. So the chances some of your family members are in Perth, in Darwin, in Brisbane, if you've got your extended family around, it doesn't matter if they get on your nerves. Just be happy because you're so lucky. And make sure your children hang around them, and make sure you invite them for dinner even if they pains, and you give them your food and do all those things. Because having an extended family support network is considered a great, great protective factor for your kids and for you. And they're not going to ruin your kids. They're going to make your kids healthier people. So it's good. If you don't have one, create one. How do you create one? Through a church community, a sporting community, a fishing community, an arts community. I don't know. Any community you can create. Bookkeeper, I don't know. There's so many things you can create. Neighborhood community. You just have to create an extended family support network through a community participation. People can't live the way Australians thought they could live in the 80s, 90s and 70s, with big fences, 2 cars, 3 TVs, and we don't need anyone else, because we just need our nuclear family, and that's all we need, the Anglo-Saxon way. Sorry, I really don't mean to criticize you too much, but it really is a little bit loopy. That's not how human beings ever lived. We are a pack animal. Let's look at the history of humankind. For the last 2 million years, we are pack animals. We live in the middle of communities. We need other people. We don't need fences and 5 cars. It just looks at look at the research. People who don't have 5 cars, in fact, they don't have anything, and they live in 1-bedroom flat with 20 people in 1-bedroom flat, they report higher levels of happiness. I would be horrified with all that noise, but they seem to be happier. So we need extended family support networks. Now, sleep, diet, exercise. This one is tough, hard work. Okay, sleep is a big one. I've been talking about sleep in the invention of the electric light, how it extended our wake time by 2 hours since the last 3-4 generations. But now we're beyond that. The invention of the electric light extended our wake time. So sleep is like recharging our immune system. It's like putting your mobile on a battery, and your immune system is getting charged. We all need about 6, 7, 8 hours sleep a night. And if we don't get it, we start getting sick, because our immune system only gets recharged really well. The main thing is sleep, and we're not sleeping enough. And so we need to sleep more, but of course we don't sleep enough. But the big thing now, because you all work with children, I think that's why I invited me to come in and talk, we immensely sleep deprived. Is the new generation, and this is another talk again. It's the problem of electronic stimulation. So in the last 5 to 7 years, this talk has to become a whole new talk on itself, which is how our children, aged 4 and onwards, but particularly adolescents, mid-primary school onwards, you think they're asleep in their bedroom and they're not. And the problem is that these children are in their bedrooms But there's only one thing I can say. You cannot have computers in bedrooms. It's not the TV anymore. The TV, it's in our minds because we think the TV is the big thing. The TV is not the big thing. Forget about the TV. The big thing now is computers and mobile phones because most of your children watch TV on their computers. They download any film they want at any time they want, including 5-year-olds. With any 5-year-old that has got an older brother or sister can download any film they want on the computer. You don't even know they can, but they can because I work with them, I know. So most of your children are in their bedrooms with their computers, not doing homework. They like, you think they are, but they're not. I guarantee they're not because their frontal lobe can't exercise that much self-regulation. And they're all either playing computer games with their friends around the world or MSNing or doing extremely naughty things. I won't even go there. Or if they're girls, particularly girls but also boys, answering messages on their mobile phone. So I invite you all to do an experiment if you've got teenage daughters. You take their mobile phones from them for 1 or 2 nights, and you'll be surprised how many messages arrive on that mobile phone between 10 o'clock and 6 in the morning. And they think if they don't answer immediately, it's an absolute catastrophe because they've missed out on some major social interaction that had to be answered at 2 in the morning immediately. Or they'll be a social outcast. And these kids are not sleeping enough. And if they're not sleeping enough, they cannot concentrate at school. You don't need rock scientists, psychologists with behavior programs for parents to fix these problems. What you need is basically a drawer with an old-fashioned key that you put in your pocket and where all the mobile phones go at 8 o'clock at night and laptops and everything else, and they don't get out of that drawer until 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 in the morning. It's as simple as that. I know autocratic parenting, never mind. It is a hierarchical society. I am serious. It's a hierarchical society. The parents are here, the children are here. It's all there is to it. When I'm 90 and my kids are 70, I'm still here and they're still here. That's all there is to it. And we're supposed to, that's a healthy family. All the research shows that. That's all there is to it. Kids cannot go to school without sleeping 8 or 9 hours a night because they cannot concentrate. That's all there is to it. They're going to get sick all the time. They're going to have impulsivity problems. They're going to have, and then we medicate them with ADHD medication. These are bizarre. You know, they just need to sleep more. They cannot have computers in their bedrooms. They cannot have mobile phones in their bedrooms. That's all there is to it. I'm sorry, it sounds a bit black and white. On this topic, I am. Okay? That's all there is to it. I'm so grateful that when my kids were growing up, there wasn't this obsession with computers and mobile phones. My son was on the edge. He's the nice, easy temperament one. Our major arguments were about addiction to computers. And he was a nerdy kid. He was an easy temperament, nerdy kid. And I remember when he was in grade 11 and 12, we had this rule. You can't be... I used to say, okay, you can play computer games half an hour a day, because all boys do, okay? Half an hour a day, and on the weekend, 1 hour. I'll give you an example. This is an easy temperament child. My daughter was a difficult, high-maintenance one. She still managed to get through law school and all this, unfortunately, and not a criticism to lawyers. Anyway, but she was really hard work, but they weren't obsessed with computers and mobile phones in those generation. You know, he'd say, okay, Mom, because I like doing my own thing on the weekends, I want you to go to this parents' dinner. All the parents, this family is having this dinner at their house on Saturday. I really, really want you to go to this dinner, and it's at 6 o'clock. Please come. I want you to put your whatever you've got for work or whatever. I want you to go to this dinner. So he wanted me to go to this dinner. He wanted us to go, to organize our lives to go. Okay, so his computer work time, imagine, his computer games time was between 6 and 7 at night or 5 and 6, and we were supposed to go immediately to this other family's dinner. That he really wanted us to go to so that we could join in with other families, which is a good thing. Research shows it's a good thing to connect with other families. Okay? Now, and he was highly motivated for us to go. He told us for weeks on end. This is an example. It happened so many times. It would get to the 10 to 6, 5 to 6. Dom, we're ready. We've got the wine. We've got the contribution plate. The guy's downstairs. I'm dressed like a normal person. We're ready to go. Because you know how teenagers think you're the only parent that doesn't look normal. We're all ready to go. We're ready to go. Is with this 1 hour computer time, it get 1 minute before the time we're supposed to be leaving. And this child was the easy temperament child, the easy to parent child, easy, good marks all the way through everything. You just crack up. You ruined my game. You ruined my life. I was about to become the king of Australia in this game. You've ruined my life. Then we scream and cry all the way to this dinner, the whole family. And this is an easy child. I just don't know how parents with children that if it was my daughter at the same situation, we'd be at each other's throats. I don't know how parents do it with these computer games things, and it would be like an origin of constant stress. Okay, so I'll just give you an example. Now, diet. The issue with diet of a protective factor. So this issue of sleep and computer safety and stuff is a talk in itself. Diet, basically, there's only one thing you need to know. It's not fat, it's not this, it's not that. I've given, in the last 2 years, probably about 15 talks in diabetes conferences, and the reason they invite me is because there's a huge overlap between type 2 diabetes, lifestyle diabetes, lack of movement, and excess consumption of sugar, which is being diagnosed in almost every second family in Australia, either during pregnancy or in young children. So it's not because you've got a gene for diabetes, which there's nothing, well, now they're thinking they've invented something, but it's because of bad diet and bad lack of movement. It's the sugar. It's not the fat. Don't worry about fat, like olive oil, avocado. You can have as much as you want. Drink the thing. In terms of fat, it's just trans fats and saturated fats, which is animal fat, like cheeses, which is my favorite thing. You can't have too much of it, but there's other fat that is not that bad. Anyway, it's not the fat that is going to kill us unless you've got genetic cholesterol high levels or heart disease. It's the sugar. It's the sugar that is the problem, okay? Now, the things that, to make it very, very quick, most Australian children, most children in the Western world are eating enormous amounts of sugar. This is just what I hear professors in this area of diabetes saying. It's a specialized area. 1 can of soft drink has got 4 times of the amount of sugar a child's body can absorb in 1 day. 1 can of soft drink. Soft drink, Australia is the greatest consumer of soft drink after the United States. Most Australian children, when they're thirsty, don't drink water. Most Australian children drink soft drink. The lower the SES, the more soft drink Australian children drink, and people drink. Even academics in universities have these machines where they go and drink. By the way, you've got 2 choices. You either drink soft drink and you take, it's like 4 huge spoons of sugar into this thing. But if you drink the diet one, most of those sugars provoke pancreatic cancer. So you choose, shall I die from cancer or from diabetes? Which one do I like the most? So drinking the soft drink is like poison. It's like poison. You do not buy soft drink for your kids. They drink water and milk if they're not allergic. That's all there is to it. Juice is almost equally as bad, not as bad. It's got about half the sugar of soft drink. So juice is something you drink once every fortnight, a little glass. You can have a piece of fruit a day, but that's got fiber. But you don't drink juice every day. You drink juice once a fortnight, once a month. Soft drink at Christmas or birthday. That's it. Never again. It's like poison, absolute poison for children. Next, what do you cut down in their diets? What do you cut down in kids' diets? You cut down breakfast cereals. Why? Because breakfast cereals is the worst poison you can give your kids. In the front of the box, proteins, vitamins, blah, 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 blah. You turn the box around, 60 to 70, 80% sugar. And that's how they start the day, Australian kids, with these boxes of these cereals which poison them. So what do? Australian kids either eat porridge, which I know it's boring, but it's very, very good for their skin, for everything. Porridge is really cheap too, so it's cheap. Or they eat high-fiber diabetes. Third thing, you replace everything white with everything brown. Brown rice, brown bread, brown pasta. And in doing those three things, these professors in this conference saying, you'll change totally, you'll prevent diabetes in the next generation. Just those three things, okay? Exercise, every single family is not being either a rugby player, because the obsession in Australia is either a rugby player or you don't do anything. Now, okay, if you're not a rugby player or triathlete, you still exercise every day. So you walk to school, you bike ride to work, every family in Australia has to exercise for an hour a day, including your kids. Okay, next most important thing, okay, I know I'm under pressure. Next, so these are protective factors. These are the things you can make a difference. The ones I explained before are the things you have to be aware of, but you can't change. But the ones on the right-hand side is the things you can make a difference when you work with kids, including preventing anxiety, depression, and promoting resilience. Evidence-based programs. In Australia, I know people in Australia always think things overseas are better, but you actually have got great cartoonists, you've got great scientists, you've got great architects. You never hear about it on TV. Now, thank God, you hear sometimes about great singers and great chefs and things. Things are changing. We've got great scientists. We've got very good evidence-based programs in Australia, including the ones on our team. We've got top technology, World Health Organization acknowledged, top in the world for prevention of anxiety and depression, treatment of anxiety and depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder. And it's considered in the literature a protective factor for the development of anxiety and depression. Okay? That means you can prevent it from happening. You don't wait until it explodes in your face. You prevent it from happening. Okay? So those are the protective factors. Okay, well, we don't have time about what the resilience programs talk about. Basically, an evidence-based program that is effective has to teach people skills, the children, the parents, the teachers, the mental health professionals, skills in all those 4 areas. Because those are the areas that the research is telling us that will promote resilience long term. Okay? Don't have time. This is what schools are going to look like one day, in about 30 years. They already look like that in Finland and Canada, but those are the most advanced countries in education. So we're going to teach kids things about literacy and numeracy, that's the bottom. But it's not going to be just that. We're also going to teach them about exercise, diet, and sleep. And then we're going to teach them emotional social resilience programs will become part of the national curriculum. That means 1 hour a week. For the duration of the primary and high school, they'll learn those skills. And also, they'll do community volunteer work 1 hour a week from grade 1 or preschool all the way until grade 12. Animal welfare agencies, 1 term, aging population and nursing homes another term, hospital welfare another term, and they rotate all the way until grade 12. What happens? Self-esteem skyrockets and children become engaged with the community. Behavioral problems in classrooms diminish. Okay, great cartoonist, your cartoonist, Michael Luning. You don't need to always import overseas ones. Very good about cognitive restructuring. I love this PowerPoint. It's about changing your mindset, and it leads me to how I want to finish my talk, changing mindset. So he's emptying everything that is in his mind, and he puts it in a big pile, and then he climbs that pile, everything that is in his mind. And when he climbs the pile, he realizes that the view is magnificent. It's about cognitive change. It's about changing paradigms, the way you see things. And that's what I want to leave you with, is changing the way you think about things. And also how to get there, perseverance, Michael Luning again. Because people say, well, how are we going to change the stigma about mental illness? And I say, well, that's how you're going to change. Michael Luning explains it very well. But I want to leave you with a story that was told in the last World Health Organization that I went to, okay? And they give an example about how prevention can work, and they give an Australian story. And there's all these Australian professors of Australian research, medicine, psychology, psychiatry there, and it didn't even click. My kids were brought up in Australia, but it didn't even click to me it was an Australian story until I heard it, and then I put 2 and 2 together. Yeah, of course it's Australian. And they said, I'll give you the history. There was this professor with this very strong Norwegian accent about how prevention can work. And we all know prevention is not very popular. Why? Because people go into politics for 4 years. And prevention is a long-term shot. Prevention is a long-term shot. Okay? And you're not going to be in government for 4 years, so who cares? But about 29 years ago, it had to be longer than that, 29, 30 years ago, there was someone in federal health that had a background in dentistry, right? And when he got elected, he was there at the right time for a short period of time, and everybody thought that when he was there, he was going to build at least one new dental hospital in every capital city in Australia, because we don't have many dental hospitals in Australia, and dental health is very expensive, 30 years ago. But he didn't do that, and everybody thought 30 years ago he was insane. What did he do? But he had the guts to do it, and he went ahead, he did it. He had the money, he did it. What he did is he decided he was going to get every single child in Australia, every single school. He created these buses that go to every school in Australia from grade 1 onwards. There is a dentist in every bus, there's a dental assistant in every bus, there's literature produced to send to parents. So every child from grade 1 until grade 7 goes into this bus once a year. They teach them how to brush their teeth. They give the pamphlets to the parents and to the kids. If they pick up a tiny little hole, they ring the parents and say, "Can I please fix your children's teeth?" And they say, well, every parent that is sane will say yes. And what do we have? I've got a 28-year-old and a 20-year-old son and a 20-year-old daughter. Both my kids have never had a filling. They've got perfect teeth. And my son only brushed his teeth when he was 14, when he kissed his girlfriend. And they've got perfect teeth. Do you know, I come from highly educated parents. And do you know when I went to the dentist, not because my parents were not educated, not because they didn't have the means to send me to a dentist, it's just mentality was different. I went to a dentist when I had a ball in my face. Why? Because I didn't like dentists. I knew people screamed when they were in their office. I did not like dentists. So I would only go to the dentist if I had a ball in my face and it hurt a lot. That meant I had to go on antibiotics, extremely expensive. Second, by the time the ball went down, they'd have to do massive drilling or pull the tooth out. By the time I became an adult, I had to do at least 3 or 4 root canal treatments, which cost MBF and taxpayers' money in Australia, a lot of money, because root canal treatment is very expensive. Okay? There was the mentality. What is the mentality? You do it after the problem is big. You don't do it before the problem is big. What was the crazy guy you had in federal health dentist in Australia did? Everybody thought he was insane. Everybody was against him. He was a visionary. He said, now, we prevent dental problems from being big by teaching kids from a very young age how to look after their teeth and sending these buses around schools. I'm telling you this because my passion is to see people like those 2 people there not having to go through this horrific pain, because I've worked with a lot of people that have had suicide in their lives. It never leaves. The pain never leaves the family, but it never leaves the people in the schools where it happened. It never leaves people, ever. Is that mental health is, we can prevent it. We can prevent it. We can do it so easily with 2 things. One, eliminating the stigma. It's not embarrassing to have anxiety and depression. We all do. So why should we hide it? We all do. We have to feel empathy instead of shame and tell people there's very good treatments out there, there's very good help out there. Second, prevention works. We've got the technology in Australia. We've got such good programs. We've got, one of them is our French programs. Evidence-based practice, we can teach from kids from age 4 onwards, at all ages, and their families, and their teachers, how to teach skills to make these kids be resistant to developing anxiety and depression. And if they do, how to deal with it so they don't get worse. But if they do have anxiety and depression, we've got effective treatments to deal with it. So why don't we use those treatments? Why don't we start using it because when parents say, oh, Mike, I can see the signs, but they're not that bad. That's great. Please bring them over now. Don't wait 5 years, because then will take me triple the time to help your kid. Now is the time. And my message to you is today, is every person in this room, if you can get your community trained, your agency trained, to learn these skills, identifying, eliminating the stigma, learning the skills to help every child, every family, every teacher that works with these people, every mental health professional, allied health professional, disseminate these skills, the knowledge of these skills, the knowledge of these programs, we are going to change this rate of youth suicide in Australia. That is the greatest cause of death in Australia. We can change that. We can. Like the guy in Australia 30 years ago that changed the course of dental problems in Australia. We can change that. It can start like now with this conference for the next 30 years. It's that easy. It just needs 300 people to decide that's what's going to happen. So that's my message. So, okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
They're nuts. Oh, sorry.
Nuts are good, they're healthy.